Hi, friends. Welcome back to an episode. I have a new friend who I've followed for a long time on Instagram. Katherine, remind me how you pronounce your last name, Katherine.
Smailis.
So I have Katherine Smailis on the podcast today, and I'm going to intro her before we get into it. But Katherine is a Western medicine trained therapist who left the hospital system to explore more holistic means of healing. She infuses science and spirituality in a way that invites you into an arena of deep expansion. She specializes in emotional intelligence and nervous system training to bring you sustainable methods of connecting that will be relevant to your relationship for years to come. She believes in the power that comes from helping couples heal together and that more peace in the world begins with experiencing more peace at home. So, you guys probably understand now why I brought her on. This is very relevant to most people listening. Katherine, I'm excited you're here. How are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm excited to be on your podcast because, yes, you followed me and then I followed you. And I was like, oh my God, Becky's doing great work. Like, you stopped me in my tracks, and I just wanted to take a second to just acknowledge and congratulate you because I haven't seen many people focusing on somatics in marriages, and you're doing a wonderful job.
Aw, thank you. That means a lot. I received that. So when I originally wanted you on the show, I was like, oh, she's the intimacy girl. I've been following her for a while now and love her stuff. And then like after you booked, you made this big coming out announcement. And do you want to share with people what that was?
Yeah, even your description of what I do is interesting because right after I feel like I submitted that, I was like, I think I'm ready for my transition and change. So now I just work with high achieving leaders. Most of the people that were coming to my space originally for quote unquote intimacy work were CEOs, politicians, business owners, entrepreneurs that felt really disconnected in their relationship. But when I got them into session, really what we were talking about were their own mental emotional blocks to connection in general, to connection to their own ability to experience joy, peace, all of those wonderful things. And as a result, their relationship was taking a hit. So I have since switched to just focusing on teaching people nervous system regulation, emotional intelligence, and somatic integration so that they can resource and feel safety, peace, joy, love, expansion within their own bodies first, which then magnetizes as an external source of those things in a relationship or job or whatever they want to experience in life.
Yeah, it's so funny because I feel like in many ways, yeah, when you first came out about this, I was like, what? She's pivoting? Like she's gained such a community, and a following around intimacy. And this is kind of shows she has balls to be able to do that. And at the same time, I'm like, I think you're still going to be doing the same exact work when it comes down to it. When we boil and simmer it down, it's really just teaching people peace in their body, whatever that is for, whatever gets them in the door. And so I do want to pause a little and dive on intimacy, but then really focus on transition. Um, what I found when I started my program and I was just like surveying women and asking them what's the biggest challenge in your marriage. I was shocked that so many people, woman after woman after woman were saying intimacy blocks. Like my husband goes to approach me or touch me or slaps my butt in the kitchen on his way by and I immediately flinch and freeze and hold my breath and then he sees my reaction and interprets that as rejection and then I feel shame and it just turns into this awful spiral of like what just happened and we don't know how to name it and we don't know how to get out of it. And so I was shocked how across the board that was like the number one thing women were coming to me with. And I knew that had been my experience, but I just didn't know how common it was when I first started this work. Like, oh, this is like everyone. So I'm curious with all the women you work with, or maybe it was mostly couples, you can tell me. In this area of intimacy, was that what found, or what was the biggest challenge?
I actually ended up attracting a lot of men who were wanting to understand the psychology of women.
Mm.
Um, and really, I did have to teach them a lot about like, you guys don't have the same level of daily fear in your body because they're not necessarily threatened by as many things as women are. So just kind of teaching men about women's reactions to different things and like explaining the polyvagal ladder is one of the greatest tools that I could teach someone in 5 minutes that changes their entire perspective on the relationship. Because if they can see that their partner is at the top of the ladder, they're at the freeze zone. And for those of you listening who aren't familiar with the ladder, it just demonstrates a very simple illustration of human behavior. And when we're in an activated state, it's almost like if you can think about climbing a ladder. If you are in a state of freeze, you're like at the top of the ladder. And if you're at the top of a ladder, are you thinking about connection? No. What are you thinking about? Safety, or you're frozen in fear because you're scared of heights. So talking about that and showing them that in order to actually receive a physical touch or receive any sort of love and affection, they actually have to climb down the polyvagal ladder back to safety. And so that just immediately like drops the threat of, oh, so it's not necessarily me. It's like maybe they had a really tough day and all of the little stressors are building up so that their system feels overwhelmed and they're just not in a place for connection. So it gives people, couples, a tool to be able to say, like, I'm in the blue zone or I'm in the red zone, not you. Like, I really want to connect, but my system is just so overstimulated that I need to make sure that I'm meeting my own needs to come back down the ladder.
Yeah, and if you're listening right now, just Google polyvagal ladder so you can see what she's talking about. It's hard to explain through our voices, but it is such a helpful. I still remember the first time a therapist ever showed that to me, and it was like, whoa, this simplifies so much. Makes so much makes sense. I'm curious with my clients, at least, like a lot of women have had traumatic sexual past, so they feel like, oh, it's obvious why I flinch and resist or whatever, and they make that association. And then there's others where it's like, I don't have that in my past, so like, what's wrong with me? And I'm like, it actually doesn't have to have anything necessarily to do with sexual trauma in your history. Like, it really could just be where your nervous system is at. And speaking of the latter, you could be stressed as hell at work and cortisol running high, and you could be in this freeze response, kind of caught in this cycle of hyperachieving. And so it's really nearly impossible in moments like that to feel open to receive touch or want to. So just curious your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, yes, if you don't have a personal relationship with any sort of bad experience sexually, you could still carry generational trauma. You could still carry the subconscious, which this is true for everyone. The subconscious messages that we receive throughout our life on TV, everywhere, on the news. Like your subconscious is always on, it's never off. So anytime you're experiencing something where you can't physically take in all of the information that you're taking in, your subconscious does. So if you're watching something on the news or you're like scrolling on your phone and you're not really paying attention, you're still absorbing all of those messages and they're subconscious. So you're not conscious of what you're actually taking in, which is impacting your nervous system, and it's storing the information so that when you do experience something in the future that's similar, your body already has a reaction and it's already reacting to the situation before you consciously know what's happening.
So wild, and just makes me think about all the times I'm having conversations thinking my kids aren't listening, and then they like make it very obvious they just heard every word. You're like, oh shit. Um, Before we move into just transition on how that can be jolting to a nervous system and tools with that, what is maybe one last thing you really wish people knew to improve their intimate lives?
Everyone is like their own planet and we're just like bumping into each other with our own experiences, with our own past wounding, and the emotional intelligence part that I have really integrated and I now work with and for an emotional intelligence company is once you do have that reaction and once you do work through the somatic practices to really clear the energy, it's still kind of in your field, in the emotional intelligence aspect, you have an electromagnetic field that extends beyond your physical body, as you know, and we're always reading each other's fields. So we literally are like little planets. If you could picture this bubble around you, and we're always reading the field of whatever's around us. So once you actually move through okay, I'm having a reaction, now I know what my trigger is, and now I'm going to make a conscious effort to maybe respond differently in the future. The emotional intelligence part comes with that last part, like understanding and having more awareness and being able to choose differently, using your emotions, using your reactions to actually gain intelligence. And that intelligence becomes like a tuning fork for your body. So you have a lot more understanding, you have a lot more awareness. You can respond versus react to situations. And then you start to actually improve your consciousness level. So kind of marrying somatics with emotional intelligence is the way also to, progress spiritually, progress with your consciousness, and make sure that you're not stuck in those habitual past woundings. And so as far as intimacy is like just understanding that we are always mirroring different wounding of each other. And if you can cultivate that understanding, you're really helping walk each other to a healing place.
I would venture to say that this is the most emotionally intelligent we've been as humans. Like, even just looking back to a generation ago, these kinds of conversations would be like, what the hell are they talking about? I'm like seeing consciousness on the rise. And I would be curious, maybe we can do another episode just on emotional intelligence because that's just intriguing to me. That's like your whole life's work now. Um,
Yeah, it's also very interesting because I just shared with you that I went to Peru, and so I'm doing all
mhm.
this like learning of ancient civilizations, and I was in Egypt last year and went to all these temples and like really absorbed what sort of population of people built these things and where have we gone wrong, because they're not they're definitely not at the level of consciousness that we are today. And yes, we are further along than the generation before us, but we are very far away from the population of humans or beings that were creating these temples and used emotions and understood all of these advanced concepts that we have just forgotten in our evolution.
That's a good point and brings up conspiracy theory conversations I've had with my husband. Like, what is with the Egyptian pyramids? Like that level of technology, that all of a sudden, like we think of Stone Age people, like no way could they have built stuff like that. But yeah, I'm curious what your thoughts are. Do you think that we had this cataclysmic end to the world and started over? What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're taking different turns on this
Oh, we are.
episode, so I hope but yeah, I mean, once you see and feel in your bones and really know in your body, like, oh, okay, I believe that we were more advanced a long time ago. And you could say maybe they're beings from a different place, or you could just say like humans have the potential and the capacity for things that we can't even conceptually understand today because we're so far away from connecting to those abilities. But as you progress in consciousness or as you progress in your own inner knowing, you start to unlock more senses. Like, you have taste, touch, smell, hearing, sight, and then you have neuroception, which and the nervous system level is reading the room, being able to read each other's bubbles. But then beyond that, you start to unlock even greater, higher senses like telepathy, telekinesis, all of these other things that if we had access to those powers or senses, maybe we would be able to have a very different society. So it's kind of just showing us that yes, we are far along, but we're really far away from um, maximizing our understanding of human potential. And one of the things that remains constant is emotions actually drive every single thing that happen on a daily basis. Everything that you are influenced by on like you're watching the news or you're listening to music or your interaction with family or kids is impacted by your emotional experience. So
Mm.
if we teach kids or we teach humans that emotions are, if you're emotional, you're crazy, or for men, like you don't experience emotions because you're weak, and see, we disconnect people from their innate inner compass, then they're very easily influenced. They're very easily swayed. So my work has been about like, how can I just continue to develop curriculum? Everything I stand for is about people just becoming more comfortable with their emotional experience so that they have more say, choice, control in their own lives.
That's so fascinating. Do you know your Enneagram type?
No.
Test will send you later. Okay. I'm just fascinated because yeah, there's so many different tangents I feel like I could go on. But one okay, thing that I know I want to talk to you about today is just this yeah, idea of change and transition. And you've probably seen this floating around Instagram, but basically the saying where like your nervous system does not give a damn between what's good for you, what's bad for you. It only cares about what's familiar and comfortable. And just as humans, we're always going to seek what is familiar, even if it's, you know, a quote unquote toxic situation. And when you just made this announcement, which I'm sure you had your behind the scenes wrestling with it, I don't know, maybe you didn't, but when you came out with it, it was just like, whoa, she's just like, hey, this is where I'm going. This is the new direction. If you're, you know, meant for my world, like you'll follow. If not, like I'm no longer doing what I was doing for so long. And this was so serendipitous the timing because my best friend today, like I told you before we started recording, she is about to have the big girl, big panties conversation with her boss of like, okay, I am going to leave this company that I've basically helped you build and grow and have escalated and gotten promoted and raises and all the things. And it feels like such a death. Like I'm hearing her in so much grief and so much fear of disappointing, you know, her boss who has invested so much in her. And I feel it. I've gone through it myself years ago when I left my successful career to start this coaching business. It seemed so illogical on paper, and everyone in that community and company was like, thought I was crazy and literally was crying that I was leaving. And so it just felt so hard to follow my own soul's calling when, yeah, on paper, something else made so much more sense and made other people feel comfortable. So just curious, what has helped you through this transition? And yeah, was it a challenge?
Yeah, I mean, you're also talking about the path of individuation here, which is like the highest form of where humans really, really desire to be. But our society, again, just like that early childhood programming or things that you've seen, we're not in a society that really fosters our own unique design in pursuing our own unique signature of our gifts. So we end up going on this adventure where we're experiencing things that help us along the way to actually end up we're trying to find that little path. So but like lots of us get lost or lots of us get stuck, and then you get stuck in this like loop of comfort. And so these brave trail makers like yourself, where you're like, no, actually I'm feeling a call towards something else. This thing has helped me to a certain point, but I've outgrown it and I'm ready to make that leap. It's something I've, and I'm sure this is something that you have experienced too. Being in, were you a soccer player growing up? Yeah. So like sports, I don't know the correlation between like sports and bravery in the world, but like I've always been a strong leader, I think because of sports, which has helped me to make different transitions easier. However, as an adult, once I worked in the hospital for like let's see, 6 years before I decided to step out. You get into this like, oh, I'm so used to having something different to do like in sports, but then when you're an adult and you like kind of get stuck in, there's nothing next, like I'm in this job, it's comfortable, but I don't have a new opponent or I don't have to travel anywhere. It's like very comfortable, so you have to have your own inner driver to start making those decisions to transition. And I started actually doing plant medicine probably around the time where I started having these drops of like, hey, I think I need to be doing something else. I started from the very first day that I got into the hospital. I was like, this is not this is not where healing happens. This is not where anything good happens. I don't want to be here, but I know I have to sit in this space to really understand the system so I can make something different. So I don't remember when I started doing mushrooms, but plant medicines have been something that have really helped to open up my perspective and see a wider view of like what else is out there beyond fear.
Yeah.
So started being like, okay, I think I could do this on my own. I made the transition. And then actually, this last transition to my new niche, I did ayahuasca last October. And I had a very profound experience, and lots of things in my life changed and shifted as a result of being able to see a lot more of like, oh, my ability to see things as they are is very limited. And so plant medicines just help to give you a really zoomed out view. And ayahuasca is a great healing modality, but it does change a lot of things. Like it can shift your personality quite a bit. So I had this like, okay, plant a seed. I know that I need to do something else. But once you like psychologically think of something, you're planting a seed and it takes time. There's a law of nature. It's called the law of germination, just like everything, how everything grows outside. It takes time to actually physically manifest. So, in order for you to birth this new thing, this new seed that's planted, it starts to take root, something else has to die. So what you just talked about, like the grieving process, it actually is it's a real thing. You have to go through the grieving process of something deconstructing, decomposing in order for something new to start to take shape.
Yeah, and it's can be in any area of life, with the people that I work with, and maybe you've come across it a lot. There is just that torn back and forth of should I stay or should I go in this current relationship. And it can terrorize so many of us. I felt caught in that indecision and so for so long. And it really was just a fear of like, I didn't know what life looked like outside of that relationship with my husband. I couldn't conceive it. And so when you're talking about like, yeah, you've found these different modalities with plant medicine to see what could be life and what could be possible outside of fear. It's just like taking blinders off in a way that we haven't really tapped into um, until recently, more and more, that becoming more popular using things like plant medicine or whatever modality fits you.
Yeah,
The
yeah,
fear can be so freaking blinding and so constricting, and we don't know how to operate or, like, live or make decisions outside of that. That's all we've been, like, conditioned and programmed to see through is the fear.
yeah. And I will add this too because I think it's important for people listening. I also, at the time of starting plant medicine, I was doing somatic work. I did like a year long myofascial release somatic internship, and that foundation and grounding in my root and feeling really embodied helped me to take those experiences and not get stuck in this ethereal place, which like some people kind of do get stuck in that like, oh, I do plant medicine all the time and now I can't even talk about anything because I'm talking about just crazy
Up in the
ethereal
flowers
stuff.
all the time,
Yeah.
yes.
Or they're just like living on a rainbow. Somatics helped me to actually be able to take that knowledge and drop it down into my body to feel more embodied, feel more confident on the minute to minute decisions that I needed to make to continue on that transition. So anytime I felt fear, I could take information and I could use somatic practices to ground and integrate and then take that next step. So it was very much like a step by step process, which helped me to eventually make the leap.
Yeah, it's key. It's key to everything. Right now, I don't know if you've seen on my Instagram, but my mom, we had to put on hospice and she
Mm.
is transitioning. Like she's too early, in my opinion, right? Like I imagined having decades more with you, mom. But her
Mm.
body is, slowly. passing, and it is hard as hell, and it's a grief journey. And I don't know where I'd be like without somatics, having not found it before going through this. My whole life I've been afraid of death, and I've always also been afraid of separation and abandonment. It's like kind of my life
Mm,
theme, core wound. And so this is like the ultimate. I had lost my dad already when I was 18. Now I'm losing my mom, who's been my longest
mm,
connection, like from the womb. There's no other human that I have been connected to as long as her. So at first, it just felt like a total, like somebody was ripping my limbs off of me, like just this severing. And that I have a friend who's also like a coach in the caregiving space. Her name is Erin, and she's been helping me through this, and she's somatic trained as well. And I have gotten to this point where the tears are still coming, but I feel so grounded, and I actually for the first time feel at peace with the just reality of death, which is something I never thought I'd say in my whole life. It's always been just death anxiety has been a huge thing for me, and just seeing my mom go through this using somatic work, it's been huge. And a friend asked me yesterday, like, how are you doing with all of this? And it's like, I actually feel super, super at peace. I'm able to be present with her. I'm able to be present with me. And I don't know how I would have gotten through this without it.
mm. I'm so sorry. That's amazing. That's an amazing realization, and you're going to be able to talk to so many people and help so many people through your own experience.
Yeah, but it's just how we are as humans. We want things to stay the same. I'm like, no, mom, you've always been here. Like, you can't leave, you
Hmm.
can't change. And I think we do that to other people too. I'm wondering if you even experienced that with your recent, transition of your niche and focus. If anybody was like, you can't do that, like, you're this label or whatever. But we freak out going through our own change and metamorphosis. It's that breaking out of the cocoon that it's like, this feels hard and sticky and constricting. And I felt safe in my little, like, right, wrapped up cocoon. And I don't know what's out there. It's too bright, whatever. But then we also freak out when we see other people changing. Like, we just,
Yeah,
what do you think that is? Why do humans just want things to stay the same?
familiarity and safety, exactly what you just said. I mean, I didn't really get as many people that actively were like, what are you doing? A lot of people were actually happy because intimacy, as much as I was passionate about it, also brought a lot of scary things, stalkers, harassment, like lots of intense things because people are so starved for connection. And so that's a whole nother can of worms. But um, I have to be comfortable with like losing a significant amount of followers, which
Yeah.
is something that social media is it's challenging to always have to feel like you're performing or feel like you have to be a certain way to maintain your population of people, whatever it is. But this is a whole nother episode of that too, where social media people on social media who are their whole business livelihood is on there, and they make a transition or they do something different, and they see that backslide. And thematics is the reason why I've been able to say like, oh, actually, this is not me losing people. It's just me getting more clear on who I'm serving, and it's going to grow again. And just feeling comfortable with like anything that needs to physically shed, visually shed, to make room for this new avenue that I'm headed in.
Yeah. So for people listening who are like, all right, Catherine and Becky, I hear that somatics is helping you through life's transitions and it's gold. Like, I'm curious for you, what does that practically look like? What are your favorite go-to somatic practices? And then I can share a few too.
Yeah, mine is very much linked with my cycle. So that's another thing that I've found is super helpful, especially as women, and in knowing and being able to track that. First of all, makes the hormone changes or more emotional um, dips make a lot more sense. So I give myself a lot more compassion and grace when I'm in between. I'm about to start my period. I'm in my luteal phase. You have that huge hormone plummet and I'm a little bit more irritable, I've started to look at my cycle as like a whole process of transformation. So in your period or when you're menstruating, you're allowed to go into this deep place of emotions, and that's where lots and lots of stuff can become alchemized. So taking those first 3 days to be really gentle with myself, allowing myself to really mother and nurture myself. And then after day three, you start to create a new egg. So you have more energy. So, like, what do I have energy for today? And really just allowing that process to be guided by my body's innate intelligence to meet my needs moment to moment.
I love that.
Um, yeah, yeah. And like ovulation, you have a lot more energy, or a lot more fiery. So like, what do I have energy for there? But really using the cycle to help choose somatic practices just helps me trust myself a lot more.
I love it. It's like a different somatic toolbox for every season, or like winter, fall, spring, summer cycles. And for people who are just like, what are they even talking about? I have an episode where I had a guest on and she did such a good job just explaining it, kind of breaking it down, the four phases that we all go through. So I'll link it in the show notes. But it's been huge for me to learn that. And so much, it's just been another way I can dissolve shame, because like depending on what phase I'm in, like what's wrong with me? Like, am I lazy? Why can't I get it together? And it's like, oh no, this is my goddess magic phase where I'm supposed to be like deepening my, rest and slowing down and connecting to my intuition. Um, it's really helped radical self-acceptance too, just learning myself on a deeper level. I've only done 2 retreats ever, both life-changing, but both times I was on my period, I was in my menstrual cycle, and I was like, "What are the odds?" And the timing of this is making the retreat extra powerful, whereas before I would have seen it as like, "Ah, I'm cursed. Why did this have to happen this week?"
That's a great reframe. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that's good. I think practically for me, one of the go-tos that even as you're listening, if you're like, what can I practice today? If you're in a transition, whether it be job or, um, kids are if you have kids, constant transition, whether they're leaving the house or going to kindergarten. I've got my, 5-year-old girl going to kindergarten in the fall, or a relationship or money, whatever it is. My go-tos for grounding is I just love the five senses. It's so simple. It's almost like too simple, but just naming five things you can see, four things you can hear, three things you can touch, two things you can taste, one thing you can smell. It gets me out of that in my head rumination, fear of the future, intrusive thoughts, like what's going to happen, back into my body. Breath
Mm.
has been huge for me too. I still feel like I resist it like the plague when I'm starting. So it's like going to the gym, like, oh my gosh, I'm about to dive into this. But as soon as I reach that tipping point in the middle of a breathwork session, I'm like, I never want to leave. I want to feel this way forever.
Mm.
And then if the transition is something that's more like triggering my fear, or if I'm having that kind of pent up volcanic energy in my body, just shaking my body, dancing, moving, going for a run, um, pushing against a wall. These are just some ideas of somatic practices that you guys can use to ground yourself through your own transitions that you're going through. But life's in constant change. It's like the two things that are guaranteed in life are, they say death and taxes, but I would also say change. It's how life is. And so, as cliche as it sounds, it's become just proven true, truer and truer and truer over time, that the only way to have, peace through the change is to learn to dance with it, flow with it. Like a wave of the ocean, you will get knocked over if you try to stand up rigidly. And like you have to kind of move your body with the change. And somatic work can really help just increase that window of tolerance for change, for movement, for flow. So, Catherine, any last thoughts, any last practical tips for people listening who want to flow through changes in their life, easier?
Well, just to support that innate flow, it is a law of the universe, the law of rhythm, and women. I'm assuming you mostly work with women. We have multiple rhythms. And so, yes, there's this law of things always being impermanent, and we have our superpower of our law of our menstrual cycle. And so, really, just knowing that you will be riding waves, and the more that you have awareness of the waves, listen to the other podcast where she talks about it, because it really is our superpower, and it will really give you a solid tool to continue to just build confidence and feel really good about anything that you face in life.
Yeah, so good. So, where can people connect with you and find you if they want to learn more?
So right now, Instagram is just my name, Katherine Smailis, and I have one-on-one sessions available. I'm doing a lot of consulting right now. So if you have your own practice and you need either consulting or difficulty, or if you have difficulty with getting client outcomes, that's kind of where I'm focused right now, just teaching people a lot about emotional intelligence, nervous system, and somatics.
So good. Well, thanks for coming on. It's so fun to meet you live in person, and
You too.
welcome back from your trip from to Peru. Sounds amazing, and I can't wait for this to air. Just thanks for being on.
Thank you.